welcome back. Well, today I am joined by Professor Min, who is the candidate for the California State Senate. Well, Professor Min, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I know it's difficult in this time of COVID.
Yes, well, we've been doing an awful lot of Zooms, as you can imagine. I'm sure you're doing the same thing. Being a professor, I'm sure you've been holding some classes online, correct?
I actually just taught yesterday. I'll teach tomorrow. So I'm teaching first year contracts law right now. And I know it's a challenge for all educators, including the teachers of my two school-age kids. Zoom is kind of the new way of doing things. Hopefully we'll get back on track soon. But I think for now, I know at least at UCI, where I teach, we're expecting to teach remotely through the spring semester.
Yes, that's what I've been hearing. So, you know what, we've adapted well. I think everyone is getting used to it, even though we're not necessarily liking it. We're definitely getting used to it. So, well, you know what you mentioned, well, we both mentioned that you're a professor. Tell me what you teach.
So I teach at the law school at UC Irvine. I teach contracts law, banking law, business law classes, basically.
Okay. All right. And how long have you been a teacher?
So we came here in 2012. So I've been teaching here at UCI since then. But before that time, I had a background in public policy. So I'd worked on Capitol Hill as a senior policy advisor, and then at a think tank as a policy director. And my research areas or policy interests revolve around economics and financial regulation and housing.
Oh, well, that's great. I mean, that's most likely a perfect background for what you're about to embark on.
Well, we've got a lot of challenges, but I know that getting our economy back on track, affordable housing, these are the types of challenges that are important ones we're facing in this state and in this community.
Okay. And then just real quick, so your wife is also a colleague at UCI, and what does she teach?
So my wife, Jane, runs our domestic violence clinic at UC Irvine. She teaches family law, and she runs something called the Initiative to End Family Violence at UCI. So she's actually been an academic her whole career. I took 10 years to work on public policy, as I mentioned, but she's a leading expert in her field. I'm really proud to be married to her. She is working on important issues around family safety, around women's safety and women's rights, and I think her work is really coming to the fore right now. But of course, the cliche goes, we met in law school.
I love it. I love it. All right. So let's talk about the real reason why you're here with us today. So, running for office is not an easy thing. And so how did you arrive at that point where you said, you know what, I need to do this?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. My background's in public policy. Until a few years ago, I'd never, in fact, if you'd asked me, I really didn't want to run for office because anyone who's run for a big seat like this one knows that raising money is a big part of this. And, I was terrible as a kid at like selling magazines or selling anything. And asking people for money was like the last thing I wanted to do. But I think we're in perilous times right now. And, we're at a point where we're at a true crossroads for our country's future. And a lot of people right now are focused for natural reasons on the White House and the U.S. Senate. If you're on Twitter or looking at the news, it's almost impossible to ignore the Joe Biden versus Donald Trump race. And these are important races, obviously, critical for our country's future. But I think we also have to look at the longer term picture. Our economy right now no longer works for too many people. For me, as the son of immigrants, I'm Korean American. My parents came here in 1971 in pursuit of that American dream. I am concerned that too many people no longer believe that economic opportunity or mobility exists anymore. We have to get things back on track. So there is a saying from the ancient Greeks that I quote a lot because it really is the mantra of my campaign. But a civilization is great when its elders plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in. And for me, that was the ethos that defined this country, that made it the greatest economic superpower in world history. But really over the last few decades, we've gotten away from that. We've stopped investing in long-term priorities, whether that's infrastructure, healthcare, education, combating climate change, or otherwise. we have to get back to thinking long run if we want to restore for our kids and grandkids and beyond that bright future that we all got to grow up with in this country. And I think California, as the 5th largest economy in the world, really has a unique responsibility to try to lead right now. Anyone who studies the history of this country's politics knows that Congress has always followed the successful lead of the states when it comes to big policy changes. This was true of Obamacare recently, which was based on Romney Care, Massachusetts. This was true of like the Interstate Highway Act or the New Deal. And so we call the states the laboratories of experimentation. If we're going to get back on track and steer this country in the right direction again, we have to start here in California.
So let's just go back to some of the things that you just mentioned, you know, affordable housing, or maybe a few things that are coming down the pike. So our community is 55 and over, and I'm sure there's many things that they're concerned about. So what are some things that you could help them understand, you know, going forward?
Yeah, well, let me start with what the California legislature does, because to be honest, not everyone knows that. And so the answer lies in the 10th Amendment. So if you remember back to like Schoolhouse Rock back in the 60s and 70s, this is just about the Constitution. But the 10th Amendment under our federalist system of government basically says that the states can do anything as long as it's not preempted. That is to say, the federal government takes sole jurisdiction over it and is permitted by the Constitution. And so on education, on housing, on public safety, you know, we have primary jurisdiction on a lot of other issues like environment or internet privacy. California has taken the lead, even though the federal government also has a significant role there. So in our state right now, I think our challenge is right now to get through COVID, to try to address the public health aspects of this, keep people safe. And then moving forward, we have a challenge of weathering through the economic downturn that we're facing right now, which is the worst in our lifetimes. And many people believe that on a sheer impact basis, this is the worst downturn we've ever had in this country's history. We've got to weather that storm over the next 2 years. Our budget is going to be impacted. We have to muddle through and hopefully come out of the other side stronger. Our economic foundation here in California is very strong. But we have to make sure that we don't make bad decisions in the near term. As far as the citizens of Laguna Woods, of course, housing and homelessness are issues that the state deals with. Public safety is an issue we deal with. And then things, you know, like safety standards in nursing homes, you know, around certain healthcare access issues. The state plays a massive role. So really, the state impacts on a huge amount of the activities that the residents of Laguna Woods deal with on a daily basis. And you don't always see that impact, but it is there.
Okay, thank you. And then, you know, John Morlock is the incumbent. And why do you think you would be a better person for that position?
Sure, there's a lot of reasons. And let's start with some of the differences between us. First, I think Senator Morlock has been in elected office of one form or another for almost 30 years at this point. I think that's what you'd call a career politician. And yet when you look at his record, it's not a particularly strong one of accomplishment. And that's because he's tended to play this role in his career of being the iconoclast who just says no, no, no to everything. You know, that is good for grandstanding. It's not good for getting things done. So when you look, for example, at Orange County, we get 6 cents back for every tax dollar that you and I pay. That is one of the worst ratios in the state. And it's because you have people like Senator Morlock who refuse to work with the other side, who take very extreme positions on issues like women's rights, where he's voted, I believe he has an F rating from Planned Parenthood. He's voted, I believe, something like 100% of the time against things like equal pay or women's safety in the community. He has he has an A rating from the NRA and an F rating from groups like the Brady Campaign and Moms Demand Action. He's a climate change denier. He's an anti-vaxxer, very anti-science. And I bring some stark contrasts. I'm a policy person. I believe very much in deferring to expertise in science, whether that's dealing with COVID, whether that's vaccinations, whether that's how we deal with climate change. I think it's going to be science and expertise that are a big part of how we get through this crisis and get California on track.
All right, well, thank you. And then just in closing, maybe take 30 seconds to wrap up and let our residents know all about it.
Fantastic. Look, my name's Dave Manigan. I'm running for state senate, and I'm running because we need to turn this around. We need to make our future for the next generation better than what we got to grow up with, and we are going in the wrong direction right now. I want to bring a long-termist, science-based approach to this seat. I want to work to bring back dollars to Laguna Woods and the rest of Orange County in a way that we've never seen before because we've lacked true representation. And I want to make sure that I'm accessible to you all. And you have my commitment that I will always be open, transparent, and accessible, even if you may not agree with me on everything. One of the things I want to emphasize is that before COVID hit, a lot of Laguna Woods residents know that I was out in the community almost nonstop, that I've gotten to know many Laguna Woods residents. And it's a really special place that I think needs good representation in the state legislature. I'm committed, once COVID ends, to being out in Laguna Woods and the rest of the district as much as possible for town halls, coffees, and other events where folks can get to know me and express their views. I understand that my role, should I win this seat and have the honor to represent you all, is that I have to represent you. And I can't do that if I'm not talking to you and communicating with you and hearing you. And I think that, again, is a huge difference between the representation we've had and what I hope to bring to the table, because I suspect most of your residents have never met the incumbent. I've never had a chance to express their views to the incumbent. And I want to bring true representation back to Laguna Woods and the rest of Senate District 37. So I hope to earn your vote. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Good luck to you.
Hey, thank you very much as well.
You're welcome. And we'll be right back after this.